Okay guys, welcome back to reading. So last week we talked about nonfiction and you guys kind of compared fiction to nonfiction. So this week we are going to talk more about nonfiction. I'm also going to read you guys a fantasy story today from our reading books, and you guys are going to answer today just some comprehension questions like we do every week. Just to check for your understanding on what you're listening to and reading along with. So today I'm going to read you a fantasy story. Tomorrow I'm going to read you another nonfiction story, and then we're going to compare the differences between fantasy and nonfiction. So last week we talked about the differences between fiction and nonfiction, and then today tomorrow we're going to talk about the differences between fantasy and nonfiction. So before everybody leaves and moves to second grade, I just want us to get a good feel for the different genres and make sure we understand the difference, because as we get older, we're going to be writing a lot more and studying a lot more literature pieces, and I want us to know and be able to tell, like, oh, okay, we're reading a fiction book today. Like, oh, okay, we're reading a nonfiction book today, or a fantasy book, or a poem. So that is what the book is focusing on. That's why every week we have a different genre, and we're going to compare them tomorrow. But today I just want you guys to listen. It's a bit of a longer story, it looks like, so just listen along, and then you guys are going to answer some questions on a sheet of paper after my story, okay? All right, it's called Click Clack Moo, Cows That Type. Farmer Brown has a problem. His cow likes to type. All day he hears click, clack, click, clack, moo, moo. At first he couldn't believe his ears. Cows that type? Impossible. Click, clack, moo, clickety, clack, moo. So his cow likes to type on a computer. So we already know that this story is not true. Okay, one page in, and without even being told that it's fantasy, we already know that this is not a nonfiction story, because last week we said nonfiction is going to be facts, it's going to have information to back up facts, and it's going to be real life events that took place. We know that cows don't type on a computer, so we already know that this story is not nonfiction and it's not true. Okay. Then he couldn't believe his eyes. Dear Farmer Brown, the barn is very cold at night. We'd like some electric blankets. Sincerely, the cows. So they wrote the farmer a letter. It was bad enough that the cows had found the old typewriter in the barn. Now they wanted electric blankets? No way, said Farmer Brown. No electric blankets. So the cows went on strike. They left a note on the barn door. Sorry, we're closed. No milk today. The cows will not give him milk because he refused to give him a blanket. You have some smart cows. No milk today? Cried Farmer Brown in the background. He heard the cows busy at work. Click, clack, moo, clickety, clack, moo. The next day he got another note. Dear Farmer Brown, the hens are cold too. They'd like electric blankets. Sincerely, the cows. The cows were growing impatient with the farmer. They left a new note on the barn door. Closed, no milk, no eggs. No eggs? Cried Farmer Brown in the background. Click, clack, moo. He heard the cows typing away. Cows that type? Hens on strike? Who ever heard of such a thing? How can I run a farm with no milk and no eggs? Farmer Brown was furious. Farmer Brown got out his typewriter. Dear cows and hens, there will be no electric blankets. You are cows and hens. I demand milk and I demand eggs. Sincerely, Farmer Brown. Duck was a neutral party, so he brought the ultimatum to the cows. So Farmer Brown is now typing his cows a letter. The cows held an emergency meeting. All the animals gathered around the barn to snoop, but none of them could understand moo. All night long, Farmer Brown waited for an answer. Duck knocked on the door early the next morning. He handed Farmer Brown a note. Dear Farmer Brown, we will exchange our typewriter for electric blankets. Leave them outside the barn door, and we will send Duck over with the typewriter. Sincerely, the cows. So now the cows are willing to give up their typewriter as long as Farmer Brown gives them blankets. Farmer Brown decided this was a good deal. He left the blankets next to the barn door and waited for Duck to come with the typewriter. The next morning he got a note. Dear Farmer Brown, the pond is quite boring. We'd like a diving board. Click, clack, clickety, clack. So now the ducks got a hold of the typewriter. The ducks were supposed to bring the typewriter that the cows left behind to Farmer Brown, but they decided to keep it for themselves. And now they're requesting a diving board. Okay, so we just talked about a story about ducks and cows who can read and type, and we know that that's not a true story. Fantasy, we talked about a couple weeks ago. You wrote a fantasy story for me, but it's usually having to do with really far-fetched stories, sometimes involving magic, such as talking animals and animals that can type and read, so it's very far-fetched, okay? You guys are going to answer some questions. I'm going to read them to you right now. I'm also going to write them in the email that your parents have, and you guys are going to answer them on a piece of paper. So the 3 questions you guys are going to answer, actually, sorry, 4 questions that you guys are going to answer. The first one is use your own words to briefly, means not a lot, a little bit, in a little bit of words, tell me what the story Click, Clack, Moo, Cows That Type was about. So you guys are going to tell me just a little bit about what the story was about in your own words. Okay? That's number 1. Number 2, how did the cows get Farmer Brown to do what they want? Okay? Number 3, what message... Number 3, how can you tell that Click, Clack, Moo, Moo, Cows That Type, the name of the story, is a fantasy? So I just said it like a minute ago, that there's certain things that happen in a fantasy story where we know that, okay, this story is fantasy. Okay, I just said it. So if you guys don't remember, you can go back. Okay, I was gonna do the 4th question. However, I don't like that question, and we're not gonna do that. So it's just the 3 questions. In your own words, tell me what the story was about. How did the cows get Farmer Brown to do what they want? And how can you tell that this story is a fantasy story? Okay? So that is for today. And then tomorrow I'm going to read you a nonfiction story. And we're going to compare nonfiction to fantasy. All right? See you tomorrow.